The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at choi.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. In another move by the provincial government in response to the housing crisis, new legislation has been introduced to create more small-scale multi-unit housing. The results in the new legislation will see changes in zoning allowing for small-scale multi-unit housing to be built where previously only single-family homes were allowed, a blanket upzoning for much of BC. In municipalities of more than 5,000 people, the legislation will allow for 3 to 4 units in select areas on a single-family or duplex lot, depending on the lot size. As well, a minimum of 6 units will be allowed in select areas zoned for larger single-family or duplex lots that are located within a yet-to-be-determined distance from transit stops with frequent service. Under the legislation, local governments like the City of Nanaimo will be required to update their bylaws to accommodate the changes by June 30th, 2024. The new proposed changes will also phase out one-off public hearings for rezoning projects that are consistent and aligned with the official community plans of municipalities. Today on the show, we spoke with Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon regarding the legislation. We follow that interview with housing advocate Leo Spatzelholtz from Homes for Living. Following that, we interview City of Nanaimo Councillor Tyler Brown regarding what the legislation means for Nanaimo. We wrap up the show with City of Nanaimo Director of Development Approvals, Jeremy Holm. With that, let's jump into it. Hello, Minister Kahlon, and welcome to Midcoast Morning. For our listeners, can you briefly explain why the province is introducing upzoning legislation, allowing for small-scale multi-unit homes where previously only single-family homes could be built?
So we have every single day families coming to us and saying that we can't find any housing options in our communities. And we know, the research is clear, that when a single family home comes down and only a single family home can get built on that site, that is just too unaffordable for too many people in our communities. And so what we're saying with this legislation is not that single family homes can't get built. They can continue to be built. If people can afford them and they want them, they'll continue to be built. But what we're saying is in the same size, in the same footprint, if somebody wants to have multiple units, smaller units that are more affordable to people, that they shouldn't have to jump through extra hoops in order to do that. So this is allowing housing in communities where we already have the infrastructure established.
What do you say to those on local councils who are concerned about having the necessary infrastructure in place to handle the increase in density? School site planning, water and sewer, transit costs?
Well, the key part of that legislation is the planning component. So what we've said with this legislation is go and engage your community, assess your housing needs reports, build your community plan, get buy-in from people so they understand where the housing is going to come, where it's going to go in the community. And when you have a plan, it's time to work the plan. So that means we don't need to have rezoning hearings every single time a project comes forward that fits in the plan the community approved. That planning will allow us to start figuring out where the population will grow, where we need perhaps some expansions of schools and other healthcare related amenities. That is the planning piece that is missing. Too many communities have official community plans that are 15, 20 years old, and projects are being approved randomly. This level of planning allows us all to plan together. We've made a $1 billion investment this year to support local governments to do either build infrastructure or build amenities in their communities. We're going to continue to work with them to make sure that there's infrastructure dollars available.
One way municipalities have paid for infrastructure are through community amenity contributions, CACs, that are agreed to with developers through the rezoning process. Now with the changing legislation and the change in need for rezoning, some of these contributions will be lost. What do you say to critics who have noted this?
Well, we've actually highlighted it ourselves. The negotiations that happen often in closed doors is actually really problematic. Imagine coming forward with trying to build affordable housing and then having to go into a negotiation on how much additional costs that need to go towards amenities. It's hard to plan projects when that happens. So what we've said is The new tool that we've launched, financing tool we've launched, it allows local governments to collect the dollars they need for police stations, fire halls, important amenities in their community, but it sets it up in the front so that when anybody comes in the door, a not-for-profit partner or a home builder, they know what their cost will be. They'll know what it's going towards, whether it's going towards sewers or water, or whether it's going to a police station. And then there's no negotiation. So we believe local governments need the dollars for the infrastructure. That's why we've created this new tool, to make sure that they can continue to have those dollars, but at the same time, it's done in a very transparent way, and it also creates certainty for everybody involved.
What are you hoping the outcome of this legislation looks like? Who will benefit from this?
Well, all the pieces of legislation, and we brought a lot of them over the last 3 weeks, all work together. Whether it was a short-term rental legislation, which was about moving away from investors buying homes to making sure that housing is available for people in our community, whether it's 3 or 4 units on single-family lots, depending on the size, whether it's the reforming of the process of how we make decisions, the financing tools so local governments have money for infrastructure, and then, of course, the one we did yesterday, which was if we're going to invest billions of dollars into transit and build that infrastructure, why not make sure we have housing around it? All these pieces work together to really reform how housing is done in British Columbia, so we can get the housing that is desperately needed for our families and our communities built faster.
Thank you for your time, Minister Kahlon.
Thank you so much for having me. Be safe.
That was Minister of Housing Ravi Kahlon. After the interview with the minister, I had a chance to speak with housing advocate Leo Spatzelholz for his thoughts on the recent announcements. Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. To get us started, can you introduce yourself and touch on the work you do in the area of housing?
I kind of wear multiple hats in the area of housing. One is I'm an independent housing analyst and look at the real estate market primarily in Victoria. The other side of it is I'm a housing advocate. I work with an organization called Homes for Living to advocate for housing reform, basically more housing, more affordable housing in all areas.
The province just announced new legislation around upzoning. Can you explain to our listeners what this means for municipalities?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the zoning map in a lot of municipalities, including Nanaimo, it's a sea of yellow. And what that means is nothing can be built there except for a single family detached house. And I think for a long time that was okay because single family detached houses were relatively affordable still. But if we look at Nanaimo today, the average price is $800,000, right? Even after prices dropped a little bit, most families can't afford that. So I think you have to ask yourself, why is most of the land reserved exclusively for a housing type that most people can no longer afford? And so that's what the province is trying to fix.
And how soon do you think this could help with the current housing crisis?
It's definitely a long-term fix, right? If we look at the timelines the province has suggested here, they're saying at the end of next June, cities should have these bylaws in place. Then it takes a while for these actually to be built. I think our best example here is a city in New Zealand, Auckland, which legalized a very similar type of townhouse kind of infill housing. And they did see an explosion of construction of townhouses. And so a lot more availability of family-sized housing. And, 5 years on, they actually have, rents have stabilized, prices are more affordable. So there is an impact, but really we're looking at more like 5 years and onwards.
Some of this housing would be considered missing middle. Can you expand on what is meant by missing middle? Why do we not see as much of this kind of housing today?
Yeah, missing middle is a term that's been tossed around quite a bit. A lot of cities are looking at legalizing missing middle. Basically, it's what is between a house and a condo apartment building, right? And that's been really, in the past, it's been either single detached zoning or we have high density apartments. The problem with that is, those high density apartments are great, they're useful, but they're often not big enough for families. So this is about making kind of these ground oriented types of infill housing, townhouses, multiplexes, small apartments, the type of housing actually that we do see in our cities. But, 40 years ago, a lot of that zoning was changed to no longer allow those small apartments. Now it's being brought back.
And will more of this style of housing translate into housing being more affordable? And how can concerns regarding speculations be addressed?
Yeah, so in the long term, yes, right? So if you look at why is housing so expensive? Most of it is just down to, well, more people are coming to live here than we have housing, right? So if there's not enough supply to meet the demand, prices go up. For single detached housing, there's nothing much we can do about that, right? Other than sprawl, there's a limit to that as well. For multifamily housing, we can actually build more of it, open up more land to allow these kinds of townhouses to be built to keep them more affordable. As far as speculation goes, the key for speculation is make the changes as broadly as possible, right? If you just say, hey, there's, these 5 lots you can build townhouses on, yeah, the value is going to jump, right? Absolutely. But if you say it's now every city in BC you can build these townhouses on, then that kind of investment is a lot more diluted, right? A developer is not going to pay a lot more for a lot if they can go to the neighbors and buy that one instead, right? So it does limit the impact on land values if you do it very broadly, like what the province has done.
You touched on sprawl. What are the downstream costs for cities associated with sprawl?
Yeah, a lot of cities have done some research on that, and their problem is that the infrastructure costs so much, and there's not that many people living there, that it's actually very difficult to maintain long term, right? At the beginning, the developer pays for it, it's fine, but then to maintain it over time, that falls to the taxpayer, and it gets very expensive as that infrastructure gets older, right? So having more people living on the same land actually helps cities in terms of their financial stability, because now that infrastructure can be paid for by more people, spread out the load, right? Keep taxes lower for everybody.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think it's a great start. I think the biggest challenge is going to be municipalities just reacting to these changes, right? A lot of municipalities were already planning to do some kind of missing middle legalization, but most of them, if you look at the timelines, it was 2 years, 3 years out. The province has said, get it done in 6 months, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that showdown evolves. There is some money in the bill to help people do that planning, help municipalities do the planning. But I suspect there will be some municipalities asking for extensions next June. So we'll have to see how that rolls out.
Leo, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. My pleasure.
That was housing advocate Leo Spatzelholz.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHOI's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at choi.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. Another way to help us out is to share this show with your friends and tell them why they should support us. Finally, if you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
I had a chance to speak with Nanaimo City Councillor Tyler Brown about how this legislation could impact the City of Nanaimo. Here's the interview. Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. The province is introducing new housing legislation to deliver more small-scale multi-unit housing for people. What are your thoughts on this, and do you have any concerns?
Yeah, undoubtedly well-intentioned pieces of legislation, and one that speak for myself, but as an elected official and urban planner, have been advocating for quite some time, just as many others have, including developers and housing advocates. So very well-intentioned, but I think some immediate reactions are that it's going to be problematic and is a little bit ill-conceived and ill-thought out in how implementable it is, and it's going to create a whole host of other problems.
Earlier today, we spoke with Minister Cullen about the legislation, noting how the changes would affect community amenity contributions between municipalities and developers. In response, the minister mentioned their new financing tool to help simplify the contribution process and increase transparency and certainty. These changes include a new amenity cost charge, i.e. ACCs. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so it's an amenity cost charge. So the idea here is that, for a long time there's been a piece of legislation called development cost charges, or DCCs, where local governments could collect DCCs from new development to pay into the result of development pressure and growth on municipal services. they were limited essentially to some of the harder infrastructure, sewer, water, and a little bit parks. For a long time now, local governments, developers, planners have been really asking for a change to that regime. And I think that is one of the benefits of the new pieces of legislation, is they are making efforts to expand they're calling it something else, but to expand the development cost charge regime, change it to the amenity cost charges, and get rid of community amenity contributions. Now, the issue there is community and amenity contributions have been collected at rezoning for other things. For example, in Nanaimo, and we're not the only one, a large portion of those community amenity contributions has been used to fund affordable housing initiatives, whether it's acquisition of land, funding of different shelter services or associated services. So, again, I think in particular with this change is well-intentioned. In this one, actually some really positive changes. However, not listening to a lot of the feedback around how to make this like a great piece of legislation. But this one in particular is definitely a step in the right direction.
Minister Callan also spoke to municipalities working within their official community plan. The City of Nanaimo recently did some work involving its OCP with Reimagine Nanaimo. To implement ACCs, the city will need to identify areas where more housing supply is planned and what amenities are needed to support that new supply. Has some of this work already been done?
Nanaimo's probably well positioned in the sense that, we do have a new OCP, and a lot of growth, areas for growth were identified, and that's ideally what we'll be directing. I would argue that maybe the minister doesn't have a complete or full understanding of some of the mixed messaging between the different announcements are. At the same time, they're saying that they're also indiscriminately, at least with the details present, indiscriminately permitting growth almost everywhere. So, we're in a position where we need to wait for more details, but on the surface, it's not clear how some of these different statements come together. It's not clear that the minister or the ministry understands fully some of the complications of their statements in absence of details. And it's also clear that they probably haven't listened to a lot of the feedback they had received by working with different local government partners, if you could call them that, and we use that a little loosely here, over the past few months on trying to develop this regime.
This legislation is being framed as a part of a solution to the housing crisis we are facing in BC by increasing supply. Will it, however, increase affordable housing supply? What more could be done in the area of affordable housing supply?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's premature to answer it. We do know that there's a genuine need for missing middle housing. The type of units that aren't necessarily large multifamily, but at the same time they're more than single dwelling. Single dwellings, especially in municipalities, do have a lot of negative impacts that go along with them with respect to their cost, servicing, the density, a whole host of things. So on one hand, yes, I think it's really a well-intentioned piece of legislation, but the way it is being implemented based on the details that have been released is highly problematic. And I think in the near term, you're going to see housing units that were set to come on stream be delayed. And in the long term, in the middle term, a little bit beyond that, there's going to be a lot of challenges if it is indiscriminately applied that allows 4 to 6 units across municipalities. It's actually going to result in property taxation increases, essentially build the infrastructure in underserviced areas that are now allowing higher units. So if it isn't, the changes are indiscriminate, what we'll see is the underdevelopment of well-serviced areas and also the overdevelopment of poorly serviced areas. And that tax burden on unplanned infrastructure upgrades caused by that new development will fall onto existing property owners.
And what is next for the city with this legislation?
Well, I think, next steps for the City of Nanaimo will be to, again, provide feedback on how these items could be more responsibly implemented in hopes that with UBCM and the province of British Columbia will take amendments seriously and make some tweaks before they do something that has a lot of unintended consequence. And I think second to that, we just have to wait for some of these details to emerge and see what we are being required to implement. It's going to take time. Thankfully, I think we're well positioned as we had already started a lot of this work, or we're doing a significant portion of it. But with that said, again, it was a responsible way of doing it, irresponsible way of doing it. And unfortunately, it looks like the provincial government has taken the irresponsible approach, and the Minister of Housing and the architects of such program clearly don't understand what good city building.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, Councillor Brown.
No problem. Thank you so much.
That was City of Nanaimo Councillor Tyler Brown. After speaking with Councillor Brown, I was able to speak with Jeremy Holm, Director of Development Approvals for the City of Nanaimo, about how this legislation will affect current and future plans for the city. Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. Based on what you know thus far of the province's new housing legislation regarding small-scale multi-unit homes, how will it change the approval process in the city?
Yeah, interesting. I'm not sure about the approval process overall, but I would say our work plan for next year, and there's definitely some consideration to what the implications are to approvals. Overall, I think we're obviously there's not a lot of information that's been released. There's more coming in December. Our understanding, the regulations the province has indicated will be delivered in December, along with a policy manual that spells out, I guess, the details of what they're actually envisioning. A lot of implications, I guess, around or considerations, I guess, around how the city will address the servicing infill in areas that weren't anticipated through the city plan. The city plan is the OCP, the visioning document for the community that was adopted last year. And if you get a chance to check it out, or your listeners do, it's an award-winning plan. It's quite something for the community to be proud of, with all the public input that went into it. But it sets the long-term planning vision for the city, as well as directs decisions on where investments in servicing should be made. So this kind of the provincial announcement sort of does challenge some of the early work we're looking at doing in implementing the city plan, the city's official community plan. Currently, there are projects underway the city had already initiated to implement the land use vision in the city plan to support additional infill housing in appropriate areas. There's been quite a bit of public consultation around that, and as well, the city's council's given direction to look at pre-zoning for affordable housing in our urban centers and along corridors. So yeah, there's a lot of work underway that we're going to have to evaluate the implications of the provincial announcements on. The city's work is very refined based on our specific context and servicing levels and community needs and our geography, the unique nature of Nanaimo. So yeah, we are evaluating what the implications are with what we know now on the projects underway and our work plan for next year and beyond, as we understand more details of what the province is envisioning, and we expect those to come out in December.
So some work may be paused while waiting on the impact of this legislation? Yeah,
I think that's actually one of the unfortunate, maybe it was understood, but likely unintended consequences of what the province is doing. And there's a lot of good stuff in there as well, but it is there's not a lot known right now. There's some good stuff, some stuff that communities have been advocating for through UBCM on reform to some of the servicing finance tools, development cost charges, etc. That that will be helpful. Overall, we're still trying to understand what the implications are of the changes, and one of the negative unintended consequences likely is that we're going to see potentially development on pause as developers, landowners reevaluate what decisions they might make, waiting to see what comes out of the province's legislative changes, as well as, obviously, as I mentioned, on city projects that are underway that we're actually aligned with this direction that the province is taking, but a more refined approach that reflects the context in Nanaimo, the unique geographical challenges of Nanaimo and the community's needs, and the vision for the community coming out of the city plan.
That was Jeremy Holm, Director of Development Approvals for the City of Nanaimo. That was our story for the day. Thank you to Minister Calhoun, Leo Spatzelholz, Councillor Brown, and Jeremy Holm for joining me today. I'm Lauren McKenzie, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHY's newsletter at chy.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom and more. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. You can find more of their music on their Bandcamp. Support local artists by buying their music. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chy.ca.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHOY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chy.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Snuneymuxw First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.